A quick overview about what I will talk about. First, I will present the concept of the irrigation calculator, a quick validation of the results, and spend some time on a demonstration of the web app, then briefly touch upon the sensitivity of the irrigation calculator, show how we demonstrated the upscaling to the North China plain. There is one slide about code maintenance and development, and I'll end with a summary. The irrigation calculator is based on the very famous FAO irrigation and drainage paper 56. It includes, however, local weather, soil and crop data that we collected from the literature and from our local partners. It also includes MODIS Earth observation data. So a brief overview about how the method works. In the first step, we calculate the crop water requirement, so the water that the crop needs in order to grow. This we do by calculating the reference evaporation. This comes from the surface energy balance and the water mass transfer. And we include the single crop coefficient, which is dependent on the crop type and on the growth period of the plant. From the crop water requirement, we then go to the crop water deficit. So using a simplified soil water balance, we estimate or we calculate how much water the plant is missing. So from all the input data that we see here, we have climate data, crop types, planting dates, and soil types. We put everything into the irrigation calculator, apply a soil water balance, and we get the amount of water that is missing for the plant. And this is our crop water deficit, or we also talk about crop, sometimes irrigation water demand. However, when you do irrigation, you also have losses. Now I switch to this slide. The losses we take into account according to the irrigation water norm of Hebei Province. This is what is used in Guantao County as well. This is our focus region. The losses can be due to irrigation method, for example, evaporation from droplets or wind drift. And we also take into account conveyance losses. For example, if you have to irrigate a large area from one well, then you have to convey that water somehow from the pump to your field, and there are conveyance losses. We also take into account different irrigation schemes. So here we see the relationship of soil water content, so how much water is contained in the soil, and the energy that the plant requires to grow, or to draw the water out from the soil and then to grow. When the soil is completely saturated, there will be some water which drips down. It cannot be held by the soil, but it will percolate downwards until a point is reached where water is held by the soil naturally. And this point is called the field capacity. When the soil dries up more, the water will empty from the larger pores first and then from the smaller pores until wilting point is reached. From the plant perspective, we have normal evaporation by the plant, while it can easily draw water from the soil. And at some point it will experience some water stress. So that is the point where the plant has to expend more energy to draw out water. And this water stress point is depending on the plant. Beyond the permanent wilting point, the plant will irreversibly wilt and die. And this small wilting is reversible, so the plant can recover from this water stress. The amount of water that we have here between the field capacity and water stress is the readily available water. Now we have implemented two different irrigation schemes. Sorry, I missed out. This is the curve, a typical curve for a finely textured soil. And in green, we have a curve for a typical coarse textured soil, like for example, sand. Sand will have larger pores than a finely textured soil, so more water will drain directly. And then there are less smaller pores than for the finely textured soil, so the total readily available water is a bit less. So our two irrigation schemes are minimum irrigation and monthly irrigation. For the minimum irrigation, the irrigation calculator irrigates every day when the water content goes below the wilting point, and it irrigates until wilting point is reached again on each day. So this is a very optimal irrigation. It only irrigates every day so much that the plant can survive. We also implemented irrigation once a month. That is, when the water content drops below the wilting point, the irrigation calculator will irrigate the field up to field capacity. It also irrigates up to field capacity at the end of each month, so every 30 days, even if the water content in the soil is not at wilting point, but somewhere in between. Why did we implement this once a month scheme? Normally, in agriculture, the farmers irrigate according to the growth stage of the plant. However, in the FAO irrigation paper, we have these three periods of growth, these three growth periods, and they usually don't correspond with the phenological growth stages the farmers use. So it's a simplification, but we found it to work quite well for most crop types that we implemented. Now we come to the comparison with the literature. Here we have a winter wheat and summer maize double cropping scheme. This is very typical for the North China plain. We calculated the annual water balance with the irrigation calculator on sandy loam in this example, and compared it to two different studies from the literature. What we are most interested in here is the deep percolation flux, because that's the remainder of the water balance, which is not measured usually. And with our 84 millimeters per year, we are quite close to we are well within the range of the literature values. We also compared the results of the irrigation calculator, you see them on the y-axis, to the Hebei irrigation norm, which is currently used by the water planners. You see here different colored points. The colors are for the crop type: blue for winter wheat, orange for summer maize, and green for cotton. These are the three most important crops apart from vegetables. The different symbols, they stand for different amount of precipitation that is available. The darker colors in the circle stand for a normal year, so a year with normal precipitation, the average precipitation. And the squares in lighter colors, they stand for drier years, so only 25% of the precipitation that would normally be expected falls. So that stands for dry years. You see that the irrigation calculator fits quite well with this Hebei irrigation norm. There are two differences here. That is cotton in dry years, and we assume that the irrigation norm accounts for a reduced yield in dry years. And we have here summer maize in normal years, where the irrigation calculator says that no irrigation is necessary, but the Hebei irrigation norm allocates about 60 or 70 millimeters. That is about the one irrigation event. So because the spacing of irrigation events is unpredictable, the Hebei irrigation norm allocates one irrigation event, although on average enough rain is falling. Here I just plotted all the crop types that we have in the irrigation norm. And in order to not make it too messy, I removed the colorings for the different crop types. I just show the two different irrigation schemes, and you see that with minimum irrigation, the irrigation calculator comes very close to the irrigation norm, plus minus approximately one irrigation event, which is illustrated by these clearer lines. With the a month irrigation scheme, the irrigation calculator estimates slightly higher irrigation water demands than the irrigation norm. Now we come to the demonstration. For the demonstration, to make it a bit more interesting also, we assume that we are an irrigation water supplier in this small village in the North China Plain. So we are responsible to supply the farmers with enough water every month of the year. In our village, we have cotton on loamy soil. The farmer plans to do a monthly irrigation on, well, there are several farmers, and in total they have 500 mu. They use surface water and flood irrigation, and the conveyance losses are medium. So they have from one water source, they have to supply a medium-sized area. Then we have winter wheat on sandy soil with minimum irrigation on 1,200 mu. They use groundwater on border irrigation. Border irrigation is when a field of a usual field size is partitioned into smaller areas. So when you apply the water, when you flood the field, you will flood smaller areas. So that means that the water on the field is distributed more evenly, and you will not have at the beginning of the field 20 centimeters of water and at the end of the field no water at all. So you can irrigate more efficiently. We also have summer maize on the same fields. There are leaf vegetables planted on loamy soil, and there we have pipe irrigation. That's just the usual plastic pipes that you can have on fields. There is also a few fields of grapes. They apply minimum irrigation using micro irrigation. So that is when you drip the water very, very locally directly to the roots of the plants. And because this irrigation calculator has been designed for China, we use the typical area unit that is used in China, that's 1 mu. This is equal to approximately 667 square meters. Now we switch to the irrigation calculator. The irrigation calculator can be reached either by hydrosolutions website. There is a link here. When you click on it, it will launch the irrigation calculator. Or you can, of course, also add or put the address in here directly. You open the irrigation calculator to a general background information. There are several tabs on top, and we will go through each one of these tabs. The irrigation calculator is available in English and Chinese, and you can switch between the languages. Oh, I'm sorry, I switched window. You can switch by clicking these bullets. So it will switch to Chinese or to English, and this will happen without you losing the information. you put into the irrigation calculator. On this map, you see an overview over the meteo stations that are available. We have Guantao Meteo Station, and we have here a dummy location for user-specified climate data. I just see a question. Should I answer questions now during the... So we start out with the climate tab because this is the first information that we use in the procedure to calculate the irrigation water demand. Here in this tab, you can again select the meteo data source. And you can also select which data to display. Let's switch to reference ET as an example. I would like to show you how you can edit the user-specified climate data in case you would like to simulate a special year. For example, the last year climate data, you can just enter it in the table below. Or you can also calculate what would happen if, for example, wind speed goes up by 2 meters per second. So here you can edit, for example, the latitude. Let's say it is higher north. If you recalculate, this will immediately change the reference ET that is calculated by the irrigation calculator, and you will see the results here. So in orange, you see the user-specified climate data where we just changed the latitude, and in green is the average data of Guantao Meteo Station. I also prepared some new meteo data in this table where I increased the maximum daily temperature and the minimum daily temperature by 2 degrees as compared to the Guantao average meteo data. So I can just mark them with my cursor, mark these 2 columns. Then by Control copy them, go to the table here, press Control V to paste the data and recalculate. And this will immediately change the data. You can also edit this data manually directly here, but just clicking in the field or in the cell and entering the numbers from your computer. Recalculate, and this will again change the evaporation. Now, when we go to the irrigation demand tab, we can select the climate data. Just needs to load. So you can select the Guantao Meteo Station or the user-specified climate data that you specified on the tab before. It will be available here in this tab. We'll go with the Guantao Meteo Station data for now. In this tab, the crop water deficit, so what you need to supply to the plants for them to grow, is calculated. You can choose different crop types, and they are according to the Hebei irrigation norm. So they have winter wheat, summer maize, cotton, a bunch of fruit trees, then different types of vegetables. So there is not an irrigation norm for each vegetables because there are very many, but they take vegetables into groups and have an irrigation norm, for example, for root vegetables or cucumber type vegetables and so on. We also added a few of our own. For example, sweet potato is not in the Hebei irrigation norm, but we added it because it was interesting for us. You can choose between 3 different soil types and adjust the planting date of the crop. And here you can select different irrigation schedule. Now we had our little example that I presented. Now we play Water Manager and put put in the fields, the crop types and fields that we have in our village, and do the water planning for a month, for a year, for a typical year. First, we have cotton on loamy soil. I didn't specify the planting date, so we'll just leave it to April 1st for now. The irrigation schedule was monthly. And we see here in this graph, the crop water deficit for a normal year. You also see already an overview over the monthly crop water deficits in this table. For example, for a minimum once a month irrigation, we have 165 millimeters of that we need to supply to the field. You can look at the root zone depletion of our daily water balance, soil water balance. What you see here is the amount of water that is lacking in the root zone up to the wilting point, which is displayed by this black line. The blue bars show the irrigation events, which are distributed evenly among the days of the month according to the number of wet days that we have in our input data. And in the once a month irrigation scheme, we see that at the end of the month, the soil water content is filled up to field capacity. Now let's see what happens if we choose minimum irrigation, just for our interest. So here we had 165 millimeters. If we switch to minimum irrigation on a daily basis, the crop water deficit goes down quite a bit. It reduces to 42 millimeters. And if we look at the root zone depletion, you see that it irrigates only when wilting point is reached, here and here. So it is much more water efficient. However, the farmers in the North China Plain cannot irrigate every day. They can irrigate when water is available. So we leave it now at once a month irrigation and add this plant or this crop type to our irrigation planning table. In the table I showed before, it says that we have 500 mu of cotton. So we enter this number here. The water source is surface water. Then we have a loss factor for the irrigation method. We have surface water with flood irrigation, and we choose this. If you want to try out this irrigation calculator and your loss factors are not the same as the ones in the Hebei irrigation norm, you can manually adjust it by moving the slider. We have a correction factor for the irrigation area. This is a proxy for conveyance losses. On the example table, it says that we have a medium-sized field. So that would be here the middle one. We can also choose a label. I just call it A, or you can leave this empty. We add this to the irrigation planning table. And when we go to the irrigation planning table tab, you see that cotton is here. So this gives a summary about the parameters that we entered, and it shows the irrigation water demand for normal years and dry years. And as comparison, also the irrigation norm for normal and dry years. You can also color the columns like this. Now we will add the other crops. We have winter wheat on sandy soil. I leave the planting date, and we have monthly irrigation as well. Add to planning table. We have 1,200 mu. It's irrigated with groundwater, that's fine. And we have border irrigation, so the smaller fields. And we have very large areas that we need to irrigate from one well. call it B. Okay. Then we have summer maize on the same soil, also monthly irrigation on 1000 mu, groundwater with border irrigation on a large area, which we call C. Then we have leaf vegetables. They are grown on loamy soil. Well, here February 1st seems a bit too early. Let's choose end of March. We have minimum irrigation on 200 mu. They use groundwater and irrigate with pipes. And they have small fields that they irrigate with each well. Label it with D. And our last crop is grapes. They grow on sandy soil. We have minimum irrigation on 200 mu as well. We use groundwater and micro irrigation on small field sizes. You see, this micro irrigation is extremely efficient. The loss factor is 0.5. So you actually only, compared to flood irrigation, you only use, you lose half the water. Okay. The last thing on this tab I would like to show you is you can download the crop and soil coefficients here on an Excel sheet. Make it a bit larger. So this gives you for each crop type the parameters of the Penman-Monteith method. And you also get the soil types and the factors for field capacity and wilting point. Okay. Now we go back to the irrigation planning table. And we check whether we have entered everything as we should. So we have the 5 crop types. We have the area, which is okay. This is the accumulated correction factors. We just get an overview here. The different soil types, planting dates that we chose, and the irrigation schedule. And in this part of the table, we get the summary of the annual irrigation water demands for normal and dry years. We also want to visualize this in the plot above. And here we see in which month which crop takes up most of the irrigation water demand. You see that winter wheat really is the big driver here. Now we can download this table, exactly this table, plus tables for the monthly distribution of the irrigation water demands to an Excel sheet as well. Let's look at it. So this gives us exactly the same table as here. We see here our labels next to the ID. And if we go to the irrigation demand for normal years, we see the ID corresponding to our labels, to our crops. And you can use this data for other visualizations or to put it into a model or whatever you want to do with this data. Since for some regions, the planning tables can become quite big, you can also save the planning table either as a reference, so you can load it later again once it is ready, or also to save it temporarily, so you can load it back again when you want to continue work on it. You save it by clicking on this graph. If you already have a table saved, you can put in here the name of the table under username and the password that you specified for this table, or you can also create a new table. I just demonstrate how to do it. You can just enter a name. It's good if you have a name which is meaningful for later knowing which table you have. For example, here I could use demo village, normal year, or something like that. Then now for demonstration, I will use the password demo2233 as well. And here too. Then you enter your email address. And click OK. This will send a verification code to your email address, which you then can paste in here. I will not do it now. You can clear the table if you want to start afresh. And I will now load a table that I did earlier called demo4455. Okay. And this will load us the table. I have put you the username and password for this table on the slideshow as well, so you can try and load it yourself. Now we go over to the next tab. We have the live vegetation map. It shows us the enhanced vegetation index, EVI, on this big map. The EVI is very similar to the NDVI. It's kind of a greenness index which shows how healthy or how vigorously the plants grow. You can visualize maps from the past. So we can go back as far as 16 and just choose any random map to visualize. The irrigation calculator always stores the best map with the least cloud cover in an interval of 7 days. You can also calculate the average EVI within a radius, which you can specify here. So you click in the field and it shows you the average EVI inside the circle is 0.2. You can also change the color coding of the map. What you see here is the time series of average EVI over the entire region that we display here. So in this case, this is average EVI over the entire prefecture of Handan. We can also choose Guantao County only, and it will show us this time series. Sometimes you see gaps here. They happen when there is so much cloud cover that an average EVI cannot reasonably calculate it for an area. So this image will likely produce a gap in the time series. Let's choose another one. Oh, it's very cloudy these days. For example, this. You can now, let's make this our circle a bit smaller, and we click in here in this area and compute a time series for the area in this circle only. If we want to calculate the time series for an entire year, here you have to choose 52 because we have 52 weeks in a year and our data in the database is 1 image per week. We start the calculation and on the lower right corner you will now see this icon, that's progress bar, showing how quickly it calculates. The longer you choose the time series to be, the longer it will take to calculate. Once it is done, it will zoom in to the past 52 time steps that we have, that's the past year. And we now see in orange the average EVI over our selected small area compared to the average EVI in the whole of Guantao. What you see here in green is the typical double cropping signal that we get. So we have one peak in May, that's the winter wheat signal, and the second peak in summer, late summer, that's for the summer crops and mostly summer maize. In this area, we have cotton, and the first peak is less dominant. The second peak comes a bit earlier, as cotton is planted earlier than summer maize, and also it decreases later because cotton can be harvested until late October. You can also move out of this selection by just moving the slider. Okay, then our last tab is the Help tab. Here we have a bit more information about how we implemented the irrigation calculator and an overview about the loss factors from the Hebei irrigation norm. You can also send me your feedback. You just type in your email, a subject, and your feedback. And to send the email, you need to move this slider just to have all the points in one line, and then click Submit. Okay, that was the Hebei irrigation norm. I will now switch back to the presentation. Here again, you see the summary table that we implemented as water managers. And we know now exactly for which month we have to supply how much water, and even who to whom, because we know our customers for winter wheat, where they are. Username and password for this table are given here. Now, the sensitivity of the irrigation calculator, I will not spend much time here. We analyzed how sensitive the irrigation calculator is if you have not a meteo station very close by to your area of interest. And we found that it is not super sensitive to it. So the impact of having a different climate station, which is still within the North China Plain, is within the model uncertainty. Also, we didn't have the single crop coefficients for all the crop types planted in the North China Plain. For some of them, we had to use the default FAO crop coefficients. So we wanted to see how bad is this for the irrigation calculator's performance if we use different kinds of crop parameters. And we compared the default crop parameters from FAO with ones from the literature that are specific to the North China Plain. Here is the example for winter wheat. And surprisingly, also here, the impact is within the model uncertainty. So it's within one irrigation event approximately. Then we looked at different planting dates for the crops. And here you see with one glance that if you plant, for example, cotton early, you will need a lot of irrigation because April, May, and June are the dry months. And if you plant it later, you will use much less irrigation. So this is sensitive, and you should know the actual planting date within 1 week approximately. We also compared different irrigation schedules. We have in dark blue the irrigation norm, in orange the minimum irrigation scheme of the irrigation calculator, and in clear blue the end of the month irrigation scheme. In gray you see maximum irrigation. This is when every day you irrigate until field capacity. It uses a lot of water, and this is not needed and never applied. So the irrigation schedule has an impact on the irrigation calculator, and it is good if you know approximately what is suitable for your area. In the North China Plain, we think that most likely farmers irrigate within these 3 bars here, somewhere between these. Now, to operate the irrigation calculator, you need the typical planting dates for each crop. And it is good if for your specific region, you know the phenological growth stages of your crops, the associated crop coefficients, and the typical irrigation schedule. It's always good to have validation data as well, because then you can improve your trust into the method. One should do maintenance every 2 to 10 years. So to adapt the irrigation calculator to new crop varieties that are planted in the area, but also to adapt the average climate data that is input into the irrigation calculator. With climate change, this input data changes ever more fastly. So it's really important to update this. I've spent a bit too long time on the demonstration. Now I will run quickly through the upscaling to the North China Plain. We wanted to demonstrate that this method can be applied to other regions as well. And in the case of the North China Plain, it was quite easy and straightforward because already the irrigation norm has the same norms for the entire Heilonggang low plains. This is the orange area. We also made sure that the assumptions in the irrigation calculator are met within the area that we are upscaling to, so that since we are neglecting surface runoff because the area is very flat, we only apply it to the very flat parts of the North China Plain. Meteo data, we use the publicly and freely available weather data from via NOAA. Now, when you want to apply the irrigation calculator to the entire Heilonggang low plains, and I mentioned before that it is good to have local weather data, you should also choose a local weather station if you apply it. So in the south, you have higher precipitation than in the north, or you also have higher temperatures in the south than in the north, which leads to a gradient in crop water demand of about 30 millimeters for winter wheat and about 15 millimeters for summer maize. It's not very much, but if you already know it, it's good to take it into account. The Heilonggang Irrigation Calculator is also online. You can reach it via this email address. And it is very similar, or the layout is the same as for the Guantao Irrigation Calculator, except that you have more weather stations to choose the data from. You also see this here. You can display them next to each other and compare them to each other. Then the irrigation demand calculator tabs are the same. We have the same crop types, soil types and irrigation schedules. Also, the irrigation planning table is the same. And the help tab, the only difference that we have here is the live vegetation map, where you can now display the enhanced vegetation index in the counties, in all the counties of the North China Plain. You can choose them here and get the result. Now, our codes for the irrigation calculator versions are online and freely available. We have versions online which you can implement or deploy relatively easily through Dr. Yuli's EDSS framework that he will present, I think, just after this lecture. This is also available on GitHub. For the EVI mapping, you'll need, in addition, the MODIS data server, which is also freely available. The tools we used for the development are Git, a version control software, R and R Studio, and Docker for the deployment. Now I'll quickly sum up the features of the irrigation calculator. So the irrigation calculator allows for monthly, not only yearly, but monthly crop water deficit estimation. You can do it for long-term average climate or for single years. You have a tab for planning the irrigation water demand, and this you can do it for one field or for a village or for an entire region. And it allows the direct comparison with the Hebei irrigation norm. It also allows the monitoring of the regional crop activities. It's available in Chinese or English, and we can add another dictionary if ever you would need that. It's also an online application available from anywhere around the world. So here are the links, how you can reach the irrigation calculator. I will leave this slide up during the question session. Outside of China, you can reach it via the hydrosolutions website, the Guantao Irrigation Calculator, and also the Heilonggang Low Plains Irrigation Calculator. From within China, you can reach the app through Dr. Yuli's decision support system. If you have any questions beyond this talk, you're very welcome to contact me via either marti@hydrosolutions.ch or ic_help@hydrosolutions.ch. Thank you for your attention.